life sciences businesses, they will vote with their feet, and that is something we absolutely must not do. Will you assure me that you will get engaged in this? You will look at both sides and look at something which is fair while recognising the cost constraints that I entirely understand?
Well, I can absolutely reassure you that I'm engaging with the life science industry on this issue. I've had a series of meetings. I think I've discussed it with the leaders of our a number of occasions. And of course, we have to have something that works for them and also works for the NHS. And I think we have to recognise that a complete solution is about more than the prices that the NHS
I would accept that case that 5,400 nurseries closed in 2020-21 and that the amount of money you're giving this year to try and meet the problem that nurseries have in funding the existing free childcare places is only 240 million, when the Women's Budget Group think that you need to spend 1.8 billion, and that well-known Trotskyist organisation, the CBI, think you need to spend 1.6 billion. So how are you boosting that interest, that the industry, the nursery providers, if you are not giving them the money to actually meet the places that now exist? And back to the Women's Budget Group, who we are really grateful to, they tell us in order to bring in your plans for 2025, it's going to cost 9.4 billion, and you're allocating 4.2, so less than half of what they need to keep going.
Okay, so now we're going to do this to Ronnie's sketch thing where I answer the question you asked me before, which you didn't allow me to answer, and then I will answer that question because you asked about...
Sorry, Chancellor, but you're at a select committee and I get to ask the questions
you do,
as a member.
But you need to allow me to answer them. And you talked about 2-year-old Noah. When Noah turns 3, he will be entitled to 30 hours of
penalties when it comes to equity financing, and perhaps dusting down the Hill review, which now is 2 years old, and having a look at their recommendations.
Well, I met Lord Hill yesterday,
Good.
And we had a very good discussion about his reforms, which we think are very sensible, and I think he believes they are largely being implemented. So hopefully no need to dust down that review because I think it's happening. And I agree with your point about pension funds, and we're doing a lot of work on pension funds. That's another piece of work that I intend to have completed by the autumn statement. And I had a meeting this week with the Lord Mayor to discuss that. He's a very enthusiastic advocate of reforming our approach. I had a breakfast with the pension funds industry as well earlier this week to discuss that very issue. So absolutely committed to
quickly,
addressing those
would
issues.
you mind meeting with me about this issue?
Of course.
Oh.
That's very kind, thank you.
We have a meeting too.
And we all have a meeting.
Are you
And if you let me
We
answer
all
the
have
question.
independent meetings.
We can tell you have a very busy diary, but just a couple of quick last questions for me. It's been announced that you have reversed the Prime Minister when he was Chancellor's decision to issue a non-fungible token through the Royal Mint. Why did you do that?
Well, I think it's a question of demand. I think we always want to be at the cutting edge in the UK in terms of new technology, but the world has changed significantly since then, and we're not convinced that the demand is going to be there in the same way.
And then final one from me is around your experience working with a Prime Minister who has previously been Chancellor. So how hands-on was the Prime Minister in developing this budget?
Well, it was very constructive because I have a Prime Minister who knows just how difficult it is to put together a budget package in very challenging circumstances, and he was able to help and support and guide me, and I think was a big part of the success of the overall budget package in showing the country how we are going to increase our long-term growth rate.
Slightly different answer from the one he gave me yesterday at the liaison committee, where he said he was deferring entirely to you, Chancellor. So I think that's been quite enlightening. But we've left us with lots of things to follow up on and lots of things that this committee will continue to work on in scrutinising your budget. But thank you very much for your time and your officials' time today. Order, order.
Been campaigning for this, cried when they heard the news because they said this is something that they never imagined they were going to get, but we believe it is very, very important. So I fully accept there are delivery challenges.
With happiness, Chancellor.
Yes.
I think some of them
Thank
are
you,
crying
Chair.
with tears now because they will not be able to cross-subsidise free places with fully paid for places. And to make up the difference. So the fact I'm sure you get emails, certainly I do, of mums and dads who say, I've had a letter from my nursery, they're closing next week, next month, and for some of them, the next day, because they simply cannot afford to carry on.
Well, there have been nursery closures, but this is a big step in the right direction for all nurseries, and I think anyone reasonably looks at what the government's announced and the money that we're putting behind this enormous expansion of childcare provision can see that we are absolutely serious about transforming the lives for parents up and down the country. With reforms, that will mean up to £6,500 reduction in the childcare costs that people face for a child under 5. That is a big, big step in the right direction.
You need the nurseries and you need the people who want to work in the industry.
And we're prepared
to pay for it. And there seems to be no plan for that at all.
Well, I think, the budget was a couple of weeks ago. The Department for Education now know they have got the funding and they will put in place the plans, and I'm sure you'll hear from them the detail of how we're going to deliver. But yes, we recognise it's a big challenge. That's why we're taking 2.5 years to roll out the plans in full. But that doesn't mean that we're waiting until then. In next year, September of next year, 1 million parents will be benefiting from this package. So that's a big step forward.
Thank you very much, everyone. Andrew.
Can I just further to that? Thank you, Chancellor. Just to be clear, in terms of the rollout and the workforce plan and so on, are you saying it is now for the DfE to determine exactly how this will be delivered?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the bell will go in the final set of questions, but we will just go straight through the bell. Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Chairman. Chancellor, there are clearly two very important sectors which for the future of the UK will really matter. One is the energy sector, and you've already identified very clearly the advances we've made with regard to renewables, and the second is life sciences. The challenges with the energy sector are that, given all of those changes, the structure and the payment mechanisms fundamentally need to be changed, and the government is already looking at that. But in this mix, the challenge for businesses who do not have the same support through Ofgem to regulate pricing mechanisms to ensure that there is fairness in the system, they are therefore faced with a market where the sorts of increases that they have been asked to pay are extortionate. If I take the non-domestic, I wrote to you following your invitation with some examples of constituency businesses and public sector bodies just to show you how bad it is. Sadly, I've not yet had a response. I set out for you very clearly that some of these businesses are looking at 400% increase. I have a local school in Devon. The increase is 800%. Now, I value what you have done for businesses. I value the new scheme. But the new scheme represents only 3% of what was on offer before. And you have the possibility for those businesses which are high energy users to apply under a separate scheme, yet to be announced, and any further information on that gratefully received. But the challenge, therefore, Chancellor, is if we are supporting our businesses, what will you do differently? Could you look at two things? One, whether or not you could sensibly extend, rather than the 3%, continue the existing scheme, which is much more generous, and look, as I've asked you before, at whether or not that list of high energy users might include pubs and the like. I appreciate they have had lots of support on business rate relief, but they are really struggling. I would welcome your comment on what support you could offer above and beyond what you've already provided.
Well, I think, first of all, I fully recognise the pressures that are faced by some businesses, and the question is what the right solution is. So, as you rightly point out, we've given business what will amount to, I think, £8 billion of support this financial year and next. So a very significant amount of support for businesses with their energy bills. But the wholesale gas prices are now below the level they were when Ukraine was invaded. And so the businesses that seem to have been caught are the businesses that renewed their contracts in a period where prices were higher before they fell. And that seems to me to be not a question of subsidy, but a question of whether the market is functioning in the way that it should. And that's why Ofgem have agreed to do an investigation. They gave me an update on their investigation. They said they were, in fact, concerned about the way that market is working, and we await to hear their conclusions. But I think that is the right issue, because, as you know, that's not a regulated market, but Ofgem are looking into whether it is functioning in the way it should, and we obviously have concerns with gas prices having fallen to below pre-Ukraine invasion levels, that something isn't quite right.
Chancellor, that's helpful. The challenge is, while this is being reviewed, businesses are still having to pay extortionate bills, and it is because of that delay that I think my ask is, and I'm not expecting an answer today, but perhaps you might write to me, to look at what you might do. Even if you had phased rather than cut support, that would have helped. So let me, in the time remaining, just turn to life sciences. Life sciences, as you said in the budget, and quite rightly, is absolutely mission critical to the future for this country. And you did make some very welcome reforms, which you've already outlined, and you also looked at what you might do for MHRA, our regulator, to look at how we could provide better support. But you will know, particularly given your previous role as Health Secretary, that one of the biggest challenges is the medicine pricing arrangement, the voluntary pricing agreement. You will also be aware that that is coming up for review this year, and you'll also be aware that because of such concern, as has been referred to already at this hearing, some businesses have effectively said, this is not a country that we feel really supports life sciences. Now, that is not a message that we want. It is not, I think, what this government believes. Can I ask you, therefore, Chancellor, because you are the only person who really understands both sides of this because of your previous role, to look at this pricing agreement and negotiation and recognise that while, of course, we need to keep medicine prices low, at the same time, if we do not properly incentivise and reward the life sciences businesses, they will vote with their feet, and that is something we absolutely must not do. Will you assure me that you will get engaged in this, you will look at both sides and look at something which is fair while recognising the cost constraints that I entirely understand?
Well, I can absolutely reassure you that I'm engaging with the life science industry on this issue. I've had a series of meetings. I think I've discussed it with the leaders of our a number of occasions. And of course, we have to have something that works for them and also works for the NHS. And I think we have to recognise that a complete solution is about more than the prices that the NHS
I would accept that if it wasn't the case that 5,400 nurseries closed in 2020-21 and that the amount of money you're giving this year to try and meet the problem that nurseries have in funding the existing free childcare places is only 240 million, when the Women's Budget Group think that you need to spend 1.8 billion, and that well-known Trotskyist organisation, the CBI, think you need to spend 1.6 billion. So how are you boosting that interest, that the industry, the nursery providers, if you are not giving them the money to actually meet the places that now exist? And back to the Women's Budget Group, who we are really grateful to, they tell us in order to bring in your plans for 2025, it's going to cost 9.4 billion, and you're allocating 4.2, so less than half of what they need to keep going.
Okay, so now we're going to do this to Ronnie's sketch thing where I answer the question you asked me before, which you didn't allow me to answer, and then I will answer that question because you asked about 2 year.
Sorry, Chancellor, but you're at a select committee and I get to ask the questions
you do,
as a member.
But you need to allow me to answer them. And you talked about 2-year-old Noah. When Noah turns 3, he will be entitled to 30 hours of free childcare. That was introduced in 2013. If someone becomes pregnant today, by the time their child finishes maternity and paternity leave, they will be entitled to 15 hours of free help. It's not the case that people will only benefit in September of 2025. The first cohort of people will benefit next April, and then there'll be another cohort who benefit next September. And just in terms of you're saying children aren't eligible, let's be absolutely clear. Unless there is someone in the household earning more than £100,000, every household is eligible if both parents are working. Correct. Well, that is the purpose of these reforms. It's to remove the barriers to work for people who want to work. And let me answer your last question just while I'm at it. You talked about support. Hang on.
If you're training to be a nurse or a midwife.
Can I answer your last question? You talked about the support that's going into the sector. It's £5 billion a year. That is a huge amount of additional support that's going up, but we need to build up to it gradually because there are thousands of nursery places.
Pay the bills. And if I thought that this was a sincere effort, I would have thought you'd have an industry where something like 90,000 people left it since 2018. It's an industry where we rely on very young women to earn £5 an hour. So they are younger, they do not qualify for the minimum living wage, and that's how nurseries get by. So what is the plan to make sure that people want to stay in this industry and care for our children rather than to leave and stack shelves in a supermarket, which is what they're actually doing?
Well, we announced a number of things in the budget to improve the supply of labour to this market, including incentives for childminders and childminder agencies. And we are having a big discussion. The Department for Education is having a big discussion because this is a big delivery challenge, which I know they are determined to rise to. But the simple answer to your question is that we have said to the childcare industry that we're putting £5 billion a year on the table of additional public money into improving childcare provision. We want to work with you to make sure that we can deliver this promise, because we think it's very important.
With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will answer questions 2, 3 and 9 together. My assessment is that the union is strong, as is support for the union. People want to see their government delivering. Oh yes, strong. Very, very strong. People want to see their governments delivering, and this is what we're doing, from levelling up to tackling the cost of living and working with the Scottish Government on delivering free ports, investment zones and city and region growth deals.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Opinion polls clearly show that the people of Scotland want the UK and Scottish governments to work together to take Scotland forward rather than going back to the divisions of the past. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the new SNP leader should focus on Scotland's economy, the NHS, schools, creating jobs, rather than going back to another divisive independence referendum?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the answer is that my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I would call on the new First Minister to seize this opportunity to do things differently, and rather than confrontation, let's have collaboration for a change.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm delighted to hear the Secretary of State's assessment. And does he agree growing support for the union shows people across Scotland are seeing the advantages of working together as we face challenges like the war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis, rather than following the separatist path of division?
Secretary of State.
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, as we've seen with free ports, and we will see with investment zones, as we've seen with city and region growth deals, when we work together, we are truly better together.
Scott Benton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Would my right honourable friend agree that by extending our cost of living support and taking measures to deliver long-term sustainable growth whilst reducing inflation, the Chancellor's budget strengthened the union by delivering for all parts of it?
Secretary of State.
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker. The cost of living support has been a total of £94 billion, the package, and that's an average for every household in the United Kingdom of £3,300.
Now go to the chair of the Select Committee, Pete Wishart.
Chair, and it's great to see you in the chair once again. Can I say to the Secretary of State that the union's in trouble because there's no longer a case for the union, and we know that because a significant number of under-50s now support independence. But perhaps he could tell us what the union's greatest achievement has been in the course of the past few years. Is it a Brexit that Scotland doesn't support? Is it high-rise energy prices in energy-rich Scotland? Or perhaps it's been run by a bunch of Tories that most of Scotland rejected?
Secretary of State.
Well, I noticed the honourable gentleman didn't quote any opinion polls to me this time. Nor when he mentioned Brexit did he call for another referendum, a result that was 52% to 48%.
Order. Now, Scottish questions are very important. There's too much chatting going on. There are subtleties in the questions and the answers that people are missing. Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I was trying to give the very subtle answer that when the Brexit referendum was 52% to 48%, the honourable gentleman wanted another referendum. The result of the leadership election was 52 to 48, and suddenly he's very happy with it. And he loves to quote opinion polls to me. He didn't quote any today. I can't think why. All I would say is the people of Scotland are seeing the strength of this United Kingdom, whether it's through free ports, whether it's through investment zones, whether it's through city and region growth deals. The desire to stay in the United Kingdom gets stronger and stronger.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And yes, it is a delight to see you back, and I hope you did enjoy the football last night. You're not too hoarse. I would like to also welcome the First Minister and congratulate him on his elevation to the post. But given that 13 of the last 15 opinion polls in Scotland have favoured no over yes, The most recent, in the Scotsman, put support to independence for only 39%. In a by-election in my constituency in Edinburgh West, council by-election, my own party won 57%, and yes, parties could barely get 20%. Given those facts, does the Secretary of State think that the new First Minister should focus on the issues which are important to the people of Scotland? The NHS, education and inflation rather than independence.
Absolutely, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we know from the judgment in November of the UK Supreme Court that the Constitution is entirely reserved to the United Kingdom Government, and therefore I would ask the Scottish Government, the new Scottish Government, to do the day job, to focus on crime, to focus on drug deaths, to focus on the health service and to focus on education. That's what devolution is about.
Geraint Davis.
Pleasure to see you back. Question 4. Thank you.
Secretary of State. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also start by congratulating the Scotland team in their triumph last night, and also to the new First Minister of Scotland. The United Kingdom Government is responsible for heavy rail infrastructure in Wales. Conversely, this is a devolved responsibility in Scotland, so the Scottish Government receives Barnett-based funding. This is consistent with the funding arrangements for all other policy areas reserved in Wales, but devolved in Scotland.
Geraint Davis.
In other words, Wales has only had 1.5% of rail enhancement investment for the UK for 5% of the population, while Scotland gets 8% for its 8% of the population. And that's why the wages in Wales are something like 73% of UK average compared to 92%. So will you give an undertaking that Wales should get its fair 5% share of HS2, £5 billion, in the same way as Scotland will get its 8%, £8 billion? And will you raise this with his colleagues at Cabinet?
Minister.
The Welsh Government has actually received a significant uplift in its Barnett-based funding due to UK Government spending on HS2. I'd also point out that the UK Government has committed £2 billion for the period 2019 to 2024, more than double the £900 million invested between 2014 and 19.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's fantastic to see you in the chair for Scotland Questions. Can I echo the comments across the House congratulating the new First Minister on his election? With regard to rail funding, cross-border rail links like extending the Borders Railway down to Carlisle are vital to people and businesses in the north of England and Scotland. Would my honourable friend agree that implementation of the Union Connectivity Review recommendations is vital in this regard, and can he give an update on this?
Minister.
Well, I pay tribute to the honourable member for his hard work with the other cross-border MPs, including myself, to deliver the extension of the Borders Railway to Hoyt, Newcastleton and on to Carlisle. I was delighted to see the funding for the feasibility study in the Borderlands Growth Deal, and we hope that the work on this study will get underway very, very soon.
Tamarjeet Singh Desai.
Pleasure to see you back in the chair, Madam Deputy Speaker. Congratulations to Hamza Youssef on becoming the First Minister. And number 5, please, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Scotland Office Ministers have regular discussions with ministerial colleagues regarding the cost of living support. At the recent budget, the Chancellor announced additional support measures for households and families across Scotland and indeed all parts of the United Kingdom. This included maintaining the energy price guarantee until June this year, which is in addition to the previous announced energy bills discount scheme. We've also made changes to universal credit to help people get back to work.
Tamarjeet Singh Desai.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of my Slough constituents are struggling, and likewise in Scotland, where over a quarter of households, 613,000, are struggling to pay their energy bills and are living in fuel poverty. And the situation is likely to worsen with increasing inflation and further potential energy price hikes. So does the Minister accept that the Scottish people deserve much better, and rather than stoking culture wars or more sleeves or obsessing about another independence referendum, we need both the UK and Scottish governments to work together and focus on tackling the continued cost of living crisis?
Madam Deputy Speaker, this government continues to do everything it possibly can to support the most vulnerable in society. Taken together with all the government's efforts to help families and households with higher costs, the total support to an average household is £3,300 over the current year. It is right that the government continues to provide cost of living support while sticking to its plan to avoid added unnecessary inflationary pressures.
Alan Kerr.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's so good to see you back in the chair. Is my honourable friend aware that the deposit return scheme that the Scottish Government plan to introduce later this year will have a significant impact and cost on brewers, pubs and distilleries? Now, whereas we strongly support the objectives of the scheme, does my right honourable friend support the calls that the Scottish Government should rethink the implementation in order to reduce the cost on consumers ultimately?
Minister.
My right honourable friend makes a very important point. The Scottish Government's deposit return scheme does not work, and it's very important we find a solution that works across all parts of the United Kingdom. We should reflect on the comments of Tesco's chief executive yesterday, which said that the Scottish Government's deposit return scheme was not fit for purpose, risks driving up prices, and that there should be a UK-wide scheme.
Shadow Minister Liz Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, across Scotland, just like in my constituency, the cost of living crisis continues to make life difficult for so many families. Inflation now at 10.4%, with the British Retail Consortium reporting that food inflation is above 15%. And interest rates have been increased for the 11th consecutive time. Now, the Chancellor's budget was yet another missed opportunity for the government to take the action needed to tackle the cost of living. Does the Minister agree with me that the government should have implemented a proper windfall tax and used the money raised to help struggling families?
Madam Deputy Speaker, no, I do not agree. This government is taking the measures necessary to support households, families and businesses across Scotland and all parts of the United Kingdom. And I think the additional windfall tax that she proposes is not something which we support.
Thank you. That concludes Scottish questions. And before we commence Prime Minister's questions, I'd like to point out, as ever, that live subtitles and a British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings are available to watch on parliamentlive.tv. That's very kind of people to say shh and to be a little bit quiet. I am aware that only those watching the British Sign Language interpretation will be able to hear what I was saying. We now come to questions to the Prime Minister, Sir Bill Wiggin.
Question number one.
Well, Deputy Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been asked to reply on behalf of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, who is attending the whole House would want to join me in paying tribute to Baroness Boothroyd, the first female Speaker of the House, and our thoughts and prayers are with her family.
I'm sure the whole House does join in sending our thoughts and prayers about Baroness Boothroyd, whom we all held in very high esteem. Sir Bill Wiggin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Phosphates leaching into the River Wye could be stopped by proven phosphate stripping technology attached to anaerobic digesters. But Herefordshire Council's bypass-hating Green and Independent group won't support or engage despite a moratorium on house building. What can he do to save our river and remove the council from such a vital, strategic and environmental responsibility?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The River Wye obviously is of huge importance to nature. We're taking action to tackle pollution and raise farming standards. He'll know about the Environment Agency's farm inspection capacity and catchment-sensitive farming advice programme, and I defer to his technical knowledge in this area. I'm sure he'll want to make submissions to the local authority.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Madam
Madam Deputy Speaker, and welcome back into the chair. And can I share the Deputy Prime Minister's words on our Baroness and our thoughts with her family today? And I'm sure the whole House will join me also in paying tribute to Paul O'Grady after his sad death was announced today. He was a national treasure and a true Northern star, and he will be greatly missed. Madam Deputy Speaker, this week the government announced their so-called antisocial behaviour policy. It's only... I'll give him some credit. The Deputy Prime Minister knows firsthand the misery caused by thugs and their intimidating behaviour, lurking with menace, exploding in fits of rage, creating a culture of fear, and maybe even, I don't know, throwing things. So can I ask him, under his new antisocial behaviour, does he think more bullies will be brought to justice?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can reassure the House I've never called anyone scum. But if the Right Honourable Lady is serious about standing up for communities and people who suffer at the scourge of antisocial behaviour, should back our plan to deal more swiftly with these issues, to make sure that we ban drugs beyond the conventional ones, give police the powers they need, and if they really want to protect the public, they'll back our plans for parole reform to make sure the murderers, the terrorists, the child killers are not allowed out free to threaten other people, and reintroduce the ministerial veto that side took away.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to see the ministerial code being introduced and adhered to on that side of the House, because it's not just his department where antisocial behaviour is running out of control. It's happening across the country. Police officers disappearing from our streets, replaced by criminals plaguing our towns and leaving people feeling unsafe. The truth is that the Conservatives are missing in action in the fight against crime. So can he tell his constituents and the public why, after 13 years of his party in government, there are now 6,000 fewer neighbourhood police officers on Britain's streets?
Madam Deputy Speaker, she really does have a brass neck, because they voted against our funding of police recruitment and the 20,000 extra police officers. But what I will tell her and the whole House is crime is lower than it was under the last Labour government. Violent crime is halved. Reoffending is 7 percentage points lower. And if she really wants to stand up for the public and the victims of crime, they should back our bill to protect victims and protect the most vulnerable from serious killers, rapists and terrorists.
Madam Deputy Speaker, no one believes that there's more police on the streets and no one feels safer. Neighbourhood policing has gone down and not up. Let's talk about crime. He knows as well as I do that neighbourhood police can help prevent antisocial behaviour and knife crime. But trusted local police are also crucial to protecting women. Women feel unsafe on Britain's streets, always looking over our shoulder as we hurry to our front door. So can he tell me, under his watch as Justice Secretary, what is the charge rate for rape?
Can I address all of those elements of that? And first of all say that the issue of rape and serious sexual violence against women is one of our top priorities. She asked what we're doing about it. Since 2019, police referrals of cases are doubled. CPS charges have doubled. She asked on my watch what has happened. The volume of convictions in rape cases increased by 2/3. And if she really wants to protect vulnerable women, whether it's rapists or from rapists or other serious crimes, they will back our parole reforms, which will mean ministers able to prevent them being released onto the public and cause more threats.
Angela Rayner.
He says that rape conviction has gone up. What he really means is that 300 women will be raped today, while he boasts about an increase of 0.5%. He hasn't answered my question, Madam Deputy Speaker, because he's too ashamed of the answer. 1.6% of rapists face being charged for their crime. 1.6%. Let that sink in. A woman goes through the worst experience of her life. She summons up the courage to relive that horrendous experience, to tell the police in detail about her assault. But she only has a 1.6% chance of action being taken. Over 98% of rapists will never see the inside of a courtroom, let alone a prison. And the rest of those brave women, Madam Deputy Speaker, they keep looking over their shoulders and hope the perpetrator doesn't choose tonight to take their revenge for reporting the incident to the police. In the last 13 years of the Tory government, more than 500,000 cases of rape have been recorded by the police. But the charge rate for those attacks have collapsed. He has served under 5 Tory Prime Ministers and had 3 years as Justice Minister. And on his watch, rapists are left to roam the streets. So will he apologise to those victims who will never get justice because of his failures?
I'll first of all say to the Right Honourable Lady, the conviction rate measured by the CPS, the leader of the Labour Party used to be in charge of the CPS, he might want to point this out. Well, actually, the conviction rate has gone up. It is now at 69%. We are doing much more to support the victims of rape when they come forward. Well, they're talking a good game. In fact, we have quadrupled funding for victims since 2010. And if she looks at the latest data, the time it's taken from charge to completion of a rape case has come down by 10 weeks or 70% in the last 3 months alone. She should get her facts straight, particularly when talking about such a sensitive issue.
Angela Rayner.
Madam Deputy Speaker, he won't apologise for the government's failures on charge rates, and 69% of 1.6%. Is that really something to boast about? Let me ask him about an issue which is directly his responsibility. On his watch, rape survivors are waiting on average more than 3 years for their cases to come to court. The Honourable Member talked about 10-week reduction. 3 years, Deputy Leader. 3 years. So 10 weeks is not anything to boast about. Those 3 years from the day of the assault to the final day of court. Is it any wonder that from April till September last year, 175 trials for rape and other serious sexual offences have had to be dropped because the victim could no longer cope with the delay? So let me ask him, when will he apologise to all those women denied justice because of his failure to sort the court backlog?
Well, she ignores the impact on the court backlog of the pandemic or indeed the CBA strike. But let me tell her what we're doing. We've quadrupled funding for victims since 2010, quadrupled the funding provided by the last Labour government. We launched the 24/7 support line so that when those victims of that appalling crime come forward, they get the support they need. We've increased the number of independent sexual violence advisors to over 1,000, and we're making sure that women that suffer this appalling crime can give pre-recorded evidence in court. We're doing everything that we can, and as I said, the rates are coming down, and we will keep taking action in this area. If the Labour Party were really serious about this, they wouldn't have voted against longer sentences for dangerous, violent and sexual offenders in the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, and she would get behind our Victims and Prisoner Bill today.
Angela Rayner.
Madam Deputy Speaker, not a word of apology, no sense of responsibility and not even a shred of shame. The reality is while people in Britain feel more and more unsafe, he seems to spend all of his time trying to save his own job and none of his time on his actual job. And it's not just me that thinks so. The Prime Minister clearly doesn't trust him to deal with antisocial behaviour because he's given that job to the Levelling Up Secretary. The way things are going, and reports are to be believed, this might be your last PMQs. So let's look at the highlights. A criminal justice on its knees, the largest court backlog on record, rape victims waiting for justice, and through it all he managed to rack up 24 formal complaints from his own civil servants. So can he say today, will he walk before he's pushed?
Madam Deputy Speaker, one thing never changes. She always comes with the usual bluster and political opportunism. Let me tell the Right Honourable Lady what we've been doing, what I've been doing this week. We've delivered new legislation to support the victims of crime, including rape, and to protect the public. We've delivered a plan to stamp out antisocial behaviour, and we've supported families with their energy bills. What's she done? What have the Labour front bench done? They tried to block our small boats bill, and that's the difference between them and us. We deliver for Britain. She likes to play her political games.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is wonderful to see you in your place. As my right honourable friend will be aware, the Thames Freeport was recently given the final go-ahead to become fully operational, creating thousands of jobs and attracting millions in inward investment. Will my right honourable friend join me in congratulating the team behind the bid and encourage businesses and investors from across the South East, indeed across the world, to take a closer look at the fantastic opportunities that exist in Thurrock? And will he work with local education providers to ensure my constituents have the skills needed to take up these fantastic opportunities?
Can I thank my honourable friend? I certainly do support and pay tribute to all of those who have made the new Thames Freeport possible, with its potential to deliver over 12,000 new jobs. I look forward to seeing the local community and the wider communities benefit from the tax benefits, the customs zones, and we'll see how these plans progress. And again, I think it's good news to see the communities in Basildon and Thurrock taking full advantage of the Brexit opportunities.
The Deputy Leader of the SNP, Murray Black.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also wish to send my warm regards to the family of Paul O'Grady, the legendary drag queen, for all he's done for my community. I also want to congratulate Hamza Yousaf as he becomes First Minister of Scotland, as the first Scots, Asian and Muslim to hold such an office. I'm sure the whole House will send his warm regards. Now, in recent days, video footage has emerged of the former Chancellor and the former chair of the 1922 committee offering their services for £60,000 on top of their MP's salary. The former Health Secretary offered his wisdom for £10,000 a day.
Going once.
Can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister, when he is inevitably booted out of office, what will his going rate be?
Well, can I welcome her to the chamber? The system of declarations is there to ensure transparency and accountability, and of course the Conservatives backed tightening up those rules to make sure that there couldn't be any lobbying. But can I also join with, except to take her up on her tribute to the new First Minister of Scotland. The Prime Minister spoke to him last night. We welcome him to his place, and of course the government want to work constructively with him in the best interest of the people of Scotland.
Murray Black. During a cost of living crisis, as his colleagues eye up barrels of cash from fake companies, it's the people across these aisles that are being led by donkeys, and they're sitting on Now, the former Health Secretary also said that he would impart his wisdom for £1,500 an hour. Most nurses earn little above £15 an hour. Who does the Deputy Prime Minister think's best value for money and for the public?
Well, I'm delighted that the majority of their health unions have accepted the pay settlement. We think that that's absolutely. We think that that's absolutely right, and she raises the issue, and of course we've worked with on a cross-party basis to curb the limits on second earnings. I noticed the benches on this side are curiously quiet. Is that because there's 10 shadow cabinet members on their benches who are taking earnings? In particular, the shadow foreign secretary looks like he certainly doesn't want to be under the limelight. He's got earned second earnings from 40 different sources. I don't think they can talk about it. And as far as the Honourable Lady is concerned, we've done everything we can to make sure there's transparency and accountability.
Jack Burton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's very good to see you back in this place. Stoke-on-Trent has been announced as one of the Levelling Up partnerships, and this is on top of the investment we've already received through programmes like the Levelling Up Fund. And this is being delivered thanks to Conservatives working together in government and on the City Council, led by the formidable councillor Abby Brown. So would my right honourable friend agree with me, if people want to continue to see the levelling up of opportunities in Stoke-on-Trent, they should vote Conservative in the local elections in May?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and after years of neglect under Labour, it's now the Conservatives, in no small part thanks to my honourable friend, who have been levelling up in Stoke-on-Trent, £11 million from the Shared Prosperity Fund, £12 million from the Levelling Up Fund, £4 million from the Regional Growth Fund, and